She said his name like he had just stepped outside to check the rain. That was the thing. She just said, "The late Michael would have loved this weather," and kept going. The fence, the wind coming in from the north. The man buying bread nodded, the way you nod at something that is simply true. I was standing behind them with a newspaper I was not going to read. And here is what I need you to understand before anything else. I had not said his name in 5 months. 5 months of managing around a single word like it was a piece of furniture I had moved to the wall so I could keep walking through the room without touching it. These two people in a shop in County Clare said it like weather, like bread, like a fence that needed fixing. And something I had been holding very tightly, without knowing I was holding it, moved. I came to Ireland to change the scenery around the thing I was not touching. I know that now. At the time, I told myself it was a change of pace, a different winter, a chance to think clearly somewhere with fewer associations. I chose February deliberately, I think, without admitting why. I wanted a place stripped of charm. I wanted weather that matched my interior. I arrived with 2 bags and the specific efficiency of someone who has learned to keep moving so that the thing they are carrying never quite catches up.
The house was at the end of a headland in County Clare. Single-lane road, stone walls on both sides, moss so thick on the stone it looked painted on. The house was built low against the wind, 2 feet of wall between me and the Atlantic, small windows, a fire that smoked when the wind shifted direction, a kitchen where the light was always dim and slightly yellow, like a room that had given up on brightness years ago and made peace with it. The house had no silence. That surprised me. The wind was constant. The ocean was constant. Old stone makes sounds at night that I couldn't name at first. Contractions, expansions, the slow breathing of a building that has been absorbing salt air for 2 centuries. I had expected quiet and found instead a different kind of noise. The kind that does not absorb anything you throw at it. The kind that makes what you are carrying louder by contrast. I brought my habits anyway. Morning coffee, a list, the posture of someone moving forward. I was very good at forward, 5 months of practice. I went into the village twice a week for supplies. The shop was small, low ceiling, worn floor, a smell of damp cardboard with something sweet underneath it. By the 3rd visit, the woman behind the counter knew I was renting the house on the headland. She asked about the wind every time. And then a man came in and they talked for a while about a dog and a field, and another name came up, Michael. And she said it exactly the way I described, the late Michael. Present tense, interrupted by a single quiet word. And the conversation moved on. Nobody in the line shifted. Nobody lowered their eyes. Michael had been gone for 3 years, I found out later. He was still grammatically in the room. I started noticing it everywhere after that. It was not a quirk. It was a structural feature of the culture. At the pub in the village, a man mentioned a woman who had died 2 winters ago as if she were a mutual friend who hadn't been in lately. There was warmth in how he said her name. Not grief, not ceremony, just warmth. The warmth you use for someone who is still part of the ongoing story. At the hardware store, the owner told me a shelf bracket had been installed by his father, dead 30 years, and he said it in the same tone he used for everything else. A fact. A piece of the room's biography. There was a cemetery at the edge of the village, set on a low hill above the sea. Very old stones, some of them tilting from centuries of Atlantic wind. Children walked through it on the way to the beach. People cut across it in the rain without any sense of intrusion. It was not a separate place. It was just another neighborhood. The residents were less mobile, but they were still residents. I had been carrying a name for 5 months. His name. Someone who had been one of the central people in my adult life,
and who had died in September, too fast and too completely for any of it to feel real. I had managed the funeral with efficiency. I had taken care of things. I had been quietly praised for holding it together. And then I had gotten very busy and stayed that way because busy was the only speed at which the thing under my sternum didn't make itself felt. In the culture I came from, the dead are moved through. Not callously, with genuine care and genuine grief, but there is a direction to it, an understood arc. You grieve, you process, you return to function. The name of someone who has died is handled carefully. You don't say it in passing, unprompted to people who may not be prepared for its weight. You protect the living from the unexpected contact with loss. I had been very thoroughly protected. One evening, I was walking the coastal path, 2 kilometers out and back along the headland, a route I had started taking most afternoons because it was one of the few activities the island would accommodate without argument. An older man was coming the other way. We had to make room for each other on a narrow section. We talked for a few minutes. The path, the weather, how far the fog had come in, nothing important. Before he moved on, he mentioned his wife. She had loved this particular stretch, he said. Present tense, she loves it here. And then he caught himself, smiled at the correction. Loved, he said. Still gets me, the tense. He walked on. I stood there for a moment with the Atlantic doing what the Atlantic does. He was not devastated by the slip. He was not performing stoicism either. He had loved someone so thoroughly and for so long that his nervous system still hadn't fully updated the grammar, and he found this funny and sweet and exactly right. Not something to fix, something to smile at. I thought about that correction for a week. I thought about it at the kitchen window with the yellow light. I thought about it in the pub. I thought about it on the path. I didn't understand yet what I was moving toward. On a Tuesday in March, I remembered it was Tuesday because there had been a work message I couldn't deal with and felt only mild guilt about, which was itself a kind of progress. I walked to the cemetery. I don't know exactly what pulled me there that afternoon. The light was the particular low horizontal gold of a winter afternoon in the west of Ireland, the kind that seems to originate from inside the land rather than from above it. Everything it touched looked both recent and very old at the same time. I walked slowly between the old stones. I read names I didn't know. I stopped near the edge where the ground dropped toward the sea and the headland curved away to the left, and you could see down the coast for several miles in that cold, clear light. I said his name out loud, just once, to the low sky and the cold air and the distance. Nothing happened. I want to be precise about this because I think the precision matters. Nothing dramatic happened. The world did not reorganize itself. I did not collapse or release or arrive at anything. The wind continued, the sea continued. A crow on a nearby stone turned its head once and looked at something I couldn't see.
But the thing under my sternum moved, not away. It didn't go anywhere. It settled into a position that wasn't painful to inhabit. The way a heavy bag feels different once you stop fighting the weight and let it distribute properly across the body it belongs to. I stood there for a while. The light began to change, from gold to amber to the cooler gray that comes just before the Irish evening commits. I watched it change. I said his name once more, quieter, the way you say something that has finally been allowed to be true. The Irish don't remove their dead from the sentence. That is not a failure to grieve. It is a refusal to pretend that love has a time limit. You can say someone's name in the same breath as the weather and the state of the fence and the price of bread because they were real and the love was real, and love does not require a living body to go on being valid. I had been protecting myself from this truth for 5 months. I had called that protection wisdom. I had called it coping. It was neither. It was just fear dressed in the language of moving forward.
He would have loved that light. I know he would have. I can say that now. You don't have to come to a cemetery on a headland to do this. You don't need the specific cold air or the low gold light or the Atlantic in the distance. You just have to stop protecting yourself from the one sentence you haven't been able to say out loud, the name that is still in the room whether you say it or not. Subscribe if this is the kind of conversation you want to keep having, and tell me in the comments, whose name are you still protecting yourself from saying?